Global warming, last year, I don't remember if, I think most of you were here, we talked about the trifecta initiatives. So let's go back over about what was that and what's happened since
Sure.
then.
Because a lot of people feel like, oh my gosh, it's hopeless, right? I'll tell you right now, it's not hopeless, but it's getting worse. It's one of those things you really want, it's like Ebola, you really want to handle it yesterday instead of tomorrow. In this case, without going into a lot of detail, A, it's real. I'm not going to have that argument. The IPCC just put out their latest thing, I think it was a week ago. They've changed all their adjectives. If anybody wasn't convinced yet, they should be convinced now. So it's done. It's real. It's a bad thing. It's going to create a lot of problems for everybody after us. What if, I'm going to back up a bit. At FIRE, we asked the smartest guys in our world, chief technology officers, to sit around for 3.5 days and come up with an answer, and they did. And they actually convinced a guy from Caltech who was the world's expert in this stuff, who believed it wasn't possible, that it was possible. And what they came up with was, it's not a single answer, it's a series of answers. You've got to have a transition time, which is probably 20 to 30 years, when you're working on this, where you're buying time, basically, and then you've got to have your final solutions figured out for after 25 years. And we're in that transition, I hope, we're in that transition time right now. So what can we do that it won't just take, be another 10 years of argument, which is exactly what Exxon wants us to do? Well, it turns out you could take every molecule of CO2 out of every smokestack and use it for something productive instead of letting it go into the sky. And if that's the only thing that you did, I think we'd be good to go. Well, how would that work? Why would we do that? It would cost a lot of money, right? Well, so we talked about this last time. I tried to think of a business reason that would ally the interests of everybody, and the answer was graphene. So graphene is an interesting thing. It's made out of carbon, the C and the CO2. It's made out of carbon, and it's going to be the most important material in the world. It's just getting going. But graphene, for those who haven't seen this yet, is carbon. It's flat carbon, two-dimensional carbon. It's the most strong material in the universe. A single atom thick layer of graphene can hold, if you wanted to break that, you'd have to put an elephant on a sharp pencil. Imagine that. So one atom thick. So 2 atoms thick is stronger, right? So, it's not hard to figure out. It conducts electricity or it doesn't, it insulates. It can be transparent, it can be opaque. You could make everything essentially in the world that's inorganic out of carbon, out of graphene. Airplanes, cars, clothing, glasses, windows, buildings, everything, roads. So imagine a new world where we don't just keep exhausting our resources, but we use a renewable resource, graphene. And when you get tired of your coat, you throw the coat in the shredder, it becomes an airplane. You throw the airplane in the shredder, it becomes a tennis racket. Everything we make could be made with one science, the science of graphene manipulation, and we'd have an endless amount of supply. So it's a pretty good idea. And as we started thinking about this, I thought I was pretty crazy. But now, the world's catching on. Europe's spending $1 billion to figure this out. UK is spending $500 million. And there are a lot of people working on how is this all going to happen. So it's no longer a silly idea. There are people everywhere. It's probably the most studied chemical in the history of the planet. And we still are just at the first day. We still are just finding markets for it. So that's part of the answer. But the biggest answer then is, well, what markets? If this is going to be a business deal, it's got to be a business. Who's going to pay for this? And this is where it gets really interesting. Everybody's heard of 3D printing? But 3D printing has a problem. It's kind of a toy. You can make prototype things, but there are very few businesses today making things, manufacturing with 3D printing. And the reason is because it uses little inkjet-like things, and there are only a couple, 3, 4, 5 of those in a machine, and almost everything whatever you're sitting on, whatever you drove in here in, is made out of many, many materials, not just 3. Oops. End of 3D printing. So it turns out you could print graphene things. Graphene can be made in tiny flakes, nanoflakes. And if you put those nanoflakes through a 3D printer, my thought was, this would be cool. Because you could manufacture anything in the world with a 3D printer. And the printer stops being a toy and a prototype machine and starts being the next revolution in manufacturing in the world. Whether you want to make a car or an airplane or clothing, whatever you want to make it with a 3D printer. And make it with graphene nanoflakes and a little glue. And by the way, that's almost as strong as the sheet itself, a flat sheet. So, perfect. Any shape, any size, any color, what do you want? Conducting, insulating, you can make chips of it, you can make wires of it, anything. So, great idea, right? Still, you kind of think, am I crazy? Maybe, you know. So I had the chance to go to Berkeley about 2 months ago, and it was the World Summit for graphene, first World Summit. I had a chance to give the keynote talk there and meet all the people, the 2 days of talks. Well, there are 4 companies working on this now. I mean, if you think there are 4, there are 40, right? There's always more. So this is really exciting. In this year, since last time when I talked a bit about this, we now have companies working night and day to make this happen. So all these pieces, and we have the first company in America to pull CO2 out of a smokestack and make chemicals out of it, just like making graphene out of it. We even have a company that makes these graphene nanoflakes that just found a partner in biofuels where they can make more money doing what I just described. So all this stuff that seemed a little bit airy-fairy-like a year ago is now pretty much under construction. And it's not thanks to me, it's just the right thing to do. It is because these things make sense. And I'm hoping that they keep it up. And if they do, we'll have a chance pretty soon to say, let's just pull out every CO2 molecule, period, for 20 years and start making clothing and tennis rackets and golf clubs and cars and airplanes and whatever else. And meanwhile, guess what? We just bought ourselves 25 years. So we can have alternative energy 100% and actually stop this damn global warming thing. That's the solution.